Guys, welcome to Reality Check. You know, one thing I learned from covering Washington politics for 8 years is that politicians in DC love acronyms, love them. From POTUS to FLOTUS, from CARE Act to FAIR Act. So given the recent Chinese bloom incident over the United States and given the collective rage against China displayed by both the Democrats and the Republicans, who agree on very little else these days, maybe it's time for a new acronym. Maybe the Congress should consider a Bonding through Beijing Bashing Act, or BBB. Sorry, I know it's not a good idea to name a program that reminds people of another ill-fated one. I mean, Build Back Better was this beautiful promise on U.S. infrastructure and it had been moving through the Senate for 3 years? Anyhow, the Bloom incident says a lot about the state of affairs in Washington. Getting tougher on China may not be the rational response to maximize American interests, but a necessary one politically.
The politics of this, Cornell, not surprising anybody here. I mean, my goodness, should Congress take a harder line on China? It's nearly universal. 3 in 4 voters believe this, and it's 70% of Democrats, 70% of independents, 82% of Republicans.
And they have these things called satellites. They're up there all the time. But this was a visual. This is Top Gun. This is Maverick. So the politics of it get involved in it in a way, and it gets overhyped. But why this is the problem? Because, Chuck, I'm a Gen Xer. I remember in elementary school hiding under a desk.
Right.
During those drills. And are we headed for another Cold War? And is it necessary?
Yep, even network news on the left questioned Biden's fuss over the blooms. CNN's Fareed Zakaria, a journalist I've long respected, also questioned the U.S. reaction. Listen.
If we step back and ask ourselves, what was this crisis? How unprecedented was it to have this event? Was it some kind of an escalation? Why this time? Well, perhaps because it could be seen by cameras, so it really is the optics of it. Of course, the United States is the world's greatest, has the world's greatest intelligence capabilities. We spy on the Chinese all the time, using many, many different mechanisms.
In fact, the United States was among the first countries to send blooms elsewhere. In January 1953, a total of 448 DWS-119L reconnaissance blooms were launched towards the former USSR, out of which about 380 blooms reached Soviet airspace. In July 1958, WS-461L blooms used the higher summer jet stream to fly into the former USSR, escorted by cover blooms or ones without cameras or other means of intelligence gathering. Now, fast forward to 2022. According to China, the U.S. flew spy blooms into Chinese airspace more than 10 times that year. We're not even talking about the NSA surveillance programs. Remember PRISM, that collects stored internet communications based on demands made to internet companies such as Google? Or Stateroom, that is a highly secretive program intercepting international radio telecommunications and internet traffic in 100 U.S. embassies and consulates worldwide. Robert Zoellick, former president of the World Bank and former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, said that Washington's reaction is a lost opportunity to improve ties. He said, afraid of looking soft on China, the Biden administration is failing to turn China's blunder into a diplomatic opportunity. Instead of postponing Secretary of State Antony Blinken's trip to China in protest, President Biden should have directed Blinken to present Chinese President Xi Jinping with recommendations to increase transparency and lessen dangers. That is a concern shared by others in that Biden's China policy is compromised over and over again by the need to please the Republicans, and that might be the case in the foreseeable future.
There's a question of how are we reacting to what is the rise of a real competitor, peer competitor, and it feels somewhat like, to me, like a reaction based on optics, domestic politics, Biden administration worried about what the Republicans were saying.
Let's face it, Biden needs some political space to implement his China policy, which he originally intended, in which he says he does not want conflict or a new Cold War. And those China hawks could perhaps see China less through the xenophobic, chauvinistic, and belligerent lenses. And China's policies and intentions, of course, could be better communicated and understood too.